One of my heroes back in my teenage years was a fella called Ron Wilson. You might remember him. He played for West Perth in the mid-70s.
Do remember Ron well.
Yeah.
He was a very good player, Ron. Very good player. Exceptional bloke. He was a character because and a lot of the West Perth guys were. I think Ronnie played in the 75 Premiership.
I think he did.
Yeah.
I think he kicked the winning goal in that grand final.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that one, but it wouldn't matter. He'd tell everyone he did anyway.
He was a mercurial player.
When I started, we lost back in the 80s about $14 million over 3 years, so we were in terrible trouble.
What are the defining non-negotiable qualities that you think leaders must have to be effective?
Everyone likes to win, but there are a lot of disappointments along the way.
If you can survive the bad times and you can learn from errors and mistakes and failures, then that builds character.
And if you make a mistake, and we all make them, put your hand up and say, look, I should have done this better.
What achievement, Trevor, are you most proud of? On the flip side of the coin, what would be the low point of your career?
Oh, gee.
Trevor Nisbett, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Yeah, thanks, David.
This podcast normally features mining executives and board directors, but we've made an exception today because I can't think of many people in any industry that would be better qualified than you to talk about organisational leadership and team engagement and culture building. What a coincidence. We're talking and recording this episode 3 days after the West Coast Eagles' victory to break a 14-game losing streak. How was the game?
Well, the game was outstanding, and it was great to see the young players working with the older guys and getting the job done. It was terrific to watch.
Yeah, good to see Yo back on the field.
Absolutely, yeah. He hasn't played for 12 months, so he's played 2 games now and he'll only get better.
For those of us who've supported the Eagles over the years, Trevor, since they debuted in the AFL in 1987, I think there's been 2 people, one off field and one on field, who are beacons of light in terms of their contribution to the club. And one was John Worsfold, of course, former Premiership captain and then coach and now head of football. And then there's you, CEO of the West Coast Eagles. So it's really, really a great pleasure to have you in the studio today.
Oh, thanks very much, David.
For those listeners who might not be fully aware of you and your background, let's look at your career. Following a playing career with East Perth in the late 1970s, you transitioned to football administration in the WAFL before joining the West Coast Eagles as football manager in 1989. A decade later, you were appointed Chief Executive Officer, a role that you held for more than 2 decades. And under your leadership, the Eagles became one of the AFL's most professionally run and commercially successful clubs, competing in 5 grand finals and winning 4 flags. That's not a bad resume.
Look, it's great in sports if you're getting to grand finals and winning premierships is part of the journey, but they're certainly hard to get to and they're even harder to win. So we've been very fortunate, but we've had great personnel to help run that. So I've been very fortunate to be involved with a great football club.
We won't mention the Dockers track record, but safe enough to say the Eagles have done extremely well over the years. Let's look back in history, Trevor. Tell us about your early years. Where did you grow up and what was it like at the time?
I'm from Bunbury originally, and I grew up in a housing commission area in Kerry Park, not far from the CBD, but certainly a long time ago now. But it's grown enormously, Bunbury, and over the years I went to South Bunbury Primary School, then went to Bunbury High School, and from there decided that, or was sort of pushed by my father really to come to Perth and go to university. So that was the way it was, and I was heavily involved in sport all my life during that time in Bunbury. So that's probably why I chose the sporting field, and eventually got into administration and got into what I did for a long period of time.
What was the family unit like, Trevor? Did you have siblings?
One sister. Dad was a shift worker. He worked in the railways, and Mum sewed curtains for a living to make it a means. We had a fairly humble upbringing, and but a very good one. I mean, Mum and Dad were fairly strong-willed on certain aspects of us growing up, and very disciplined. So we learnt to toe the line, and which was a good thing. And I think that put me in good stead for later on in life.
Outside of your immediate family, was there any individual that had an oversized impact or influence on you in those early days?
Probably a couple of school teachers, but probably my football coaches. I had some wonderful coaches over the years, and football, being a very big team sport, it tends to help you understand what it's like to work with people as a group. And I think people like Merv Kennedy, who was my first senior coach, Bob Farquhar and Terry House, who were my initial junior coaches, right through to Sid Simeon, who coached me last year as a junior. It was quite an amazing journey, and playing senior footy at a young age under Merv was quite an experience, because it was so different and so tough. So I think they're the sort of people who helped ground me and set me up for later life.
There's a lot of lessons to be learned from team sport, isn't there? And a lot of parallels between professional sport and business.
No doubt.
The lessons of leadership and engagement are very transferable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Particularly when you've got big teams. I mean, Australian football is, it's the biggest team sport in the world. So you've got, 23 players engaged on a Saturday, but you've got squads of 45. So it's a big team effort just to get that team on the field. And now you've got multiple teams in multiple clubs with big support staff. So it's a big business these days.
One of the things I remember when I started to be a spectator at WAFL games back in the mid-70s was the state of the ground. I mean, often it would be a mud bath, wouldn't it? You contrast that today with, let's say, Optus Stadium. It's such a clean environment and such a perfect playing field. It's almost like a bowling green compared to what you played on in your day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, there were also cricket pitches in the middle of the grounds and all sorts of things when I was playing. So you're in a mud bath compared to a bowling green these days.
Yeah. Will you share something with us that outside of your family not many people know about you?
Probably I'm into horse racing in a big way. I love the horses. I grew up with my grandfather training horses, and my dad heavily involved in horse racing, and then I've sort of followed that through. And because of my involvement in football, I haven't been able to attend many race meetings, but I get to the Melbourne Carnival every year and the Perth Carnival every year. So that's probably something.
Yeah.
And I'm not a golfer, so horse racing's it for me.
A lot of footy players or ex-footy players are into the horses, aren't they? It's a high proportion.
Yeah, there are a lot of players. I think it's the exhilaration of the sport, which is difficult to talk about unless you're in it. A lot of people don't like horse racing and they don't like football, but when you're in both, it is exhilarating.
Yeah. You get lost in the moment, don't you? You are absolutely focused on the event in front of you.
Oh, sure. And everyone likes to win, but there are a lot of disappointments along the way.
As you look back in the rear vision mirror of your career, what achievement, Trevor, are you most proud of? And on the flip side of the coin, what would be the low point of your career?
Well, I think there's a number of high points. We've been very fortunate. When I first started at the football club, we had 14 staff members, and we've grown to when I left, we had about 150 staff members plus 3 teams, a men's, women's, and a WAFL team. So you've got another, a number of athletes participating there, and I think the growth of the club from also being broke. When I started, we'd lost back in the 80s about $14 million over 3 years, so we were in terrible trouble, which equates to a lot of money these days in football terminology. So I think that's one of the high points is we've been able to turn the club into one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest club in the competition, and getting 100,000 members, over 100,000 members was a wonderful achievement, and building new premises out at Min Resources Park in Lathlane is quite special. And I think one of the other things that we were able to introduce was the Wirrpanda Foundation, which is a foundation that looks after Indigenous Australians, and we're extremely proud of what that organisation's done over 20 years.
David Wirrpanda was the basis of that foundation, wasn't he?
He was, and David still helps out where he can.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful player, but also terrific help in setting up the foundation.
Yeah. No, he was a brilliant player with such flair and agility.
Yeah, unbelievable player.
Yeah. Looking ahead, post your career with the West Coast Eagles, what are you most looking forward to achieving?
I think everyone says this, but spending some time with family is always a good thing. And with grandkids, it's a wonderful time of your life where you've got your weekends back, so you're able to spend some time with the kids, and that's probably the thing I was most looking forward to. The other thing I was looking forward to was educating future administrators and doing some leadership courses for companies that I think a lot of companies do need assistance with their leadership programs and what they tend to do. And sport tends to assist companies, I think, with a different perspective. So I think they're the things I've been looking forward to and I have been doing, so it's been fun.
Many really effective leaders take a lot of pride in transferring their knowledge and skills to younger, less experienced people. I think that's one of the defining qualities of leadership, is the mentoring and the coaching aspect.
I think we all go through that. I think one of the things I've always noticed about leadership is the great leaders always have really good mentors. They have people that they can rely on and call, and sometimes the feedback's not always great. And if you have those sort of mentors and people who tell you the truth, I think you're in a pretty good position.
Let's talk about the qualities of leadership. You've seen many good leaders and you are one yourself. What are the defining non-negotiable qualities that you think leaders must have to be effective?
There's a lot of books and there's a lot of vision on leadership which you can watch and read and all the rest. I think some of it's innate. I think most leaders have a toughness about them that sometimes they're uncompromising, sometimes to a fault. But I think also great leaders tend to want to look after their people. They tend to have this toughness, but also the empathy that's required to help people grow. And I think the good leaders do that. But I think an innate toughness is something that good leaders have.
Some people would call that resilience, I guess, the ability to be able to get back on your feet when you've been knocked down. And as an executive recruiter, I'm often looking out for candidates for executive roles, Trevor, that are battle-scarred, because if you can survive the bad times and you can learn from errors and mistakes and failures, then that builds character. And if you've been through the wars, I think it augurs well for a good leadership role within an organisation, and caring for people as well. I often think one of my favourite coaches was Kevin Sheedy, and he seemed to be the sort of coach that really got inside a young man's head, a young player's head, to work out where they came from, what their heritage and background was, what motivated them, what their family circumstances were. So he was looking to build as complete a human being as possible, not just focusing on the technical skills of playing football. I presume you would have met Kevin Sheedy. What was your impression of him?
Yeah, I think Kevin was one of the great coaches of all time. I mean, his longevity, stresses that. And I was fortunate enough to work with Michael Malthouse. It was very similar, and was really hard as hell on these players. But I mean, he was also interested in their welfare, and that's why a number of the players have relied on Michael in their growing up and their futures to find their niche in life. They've always called him to see what he thought about their next move, and I think that's what made both of those people really good coaches. They're outstanding coaches.
I often think that vulnerability is another quality of leadership, and particularly in the business scenario. Looking at football, is that the case as well? Because I don't see evidence of many coaches declaring their vulnerabilities to their players as a means of building trust with them. Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, look, I think the good coaches do. I think I've been lucky enough to work with a coach called Hayden Bunton Jr, Michael Malthouse, John Worsfold and Adam Simpson, to name a few. And I think Hayden was probably the best at that. Post-game, if we didn't have a good game, on some occasions I heard him say to the group, this one's on me. I mean, I didn't coach well today, and that is very unusual for coaches. And there's been a few in more recent times who've come out and said post-match that they didn't have a great game themselves, and let alone the players. Now, if you get to that stage, I think you earn trust and faith with your player group, and if you can talk to them openly and say, look, this didn't go well today, and it's not all on you guys. I mean, I was in the box and I didn't make a couple of moves I should have made. Now, if someone says that and owns up and puts their hand up, and I've always been one for that. I mean, if you make a mistake, and we all make them, put your hand up and say, look, I should have done this better.
Yeah, spot on. Take ownership of the victories as well as the failures. These days, it seems to me that there are a number of coaches. Obviously, you've got the head coach or the senior coach, and then a number of subordinate coaches that look after different segments of the team, forwards and backs and midfielders and so on. Given that structure of coaching, does the senior coach tend to get very close to the individual players, or is there a bit of a buffer or a distance between the head coach and the players?
Well, I think the better coaches try to get to everyone, and it's almost impossible with 45 on the list from week to week. And so they're mainly dealing with their senior team, and the assistant coaches are dealing with the development of their younger players underneath. But I think the better coaches tend to get time with every player during a week. It can be a long week, particularly after a loss. So you do need to try and get to as many players as you can, and I think the better coaches do that. Even though the assistants are very good at what they do, I think in every organisation, everyone likes to hear from the boss, and they also like to hear individually, not just as the whole group every time that you have a discussion. So the good coaches do that.
As a CEO of the Eagles, Trevor, can you share any particular challenges that you've faced as a football administrator, and are you willing to share a particular failure that, as a result of, you became a more effective leader?
Well, we had so many challenges over the years. I mean, we were a football club that was even joining the competition, we were much maligned because we're an interstate club. We weren't part of the furniture, and consequently, and we really only got admitted into the competition because we were able to pay $4 million up front. And from that point on, we had to pay for everything, for accommodation and flights for other clubs to come and play us, let alone. So we weren't really part of the comp. We were an adjunct to it. So it took us a while to overcome that challenge and work with, and I think earning a reputation of we're prepared to work with the then VFL and now AFL, rather than have conflict on a regular basis. I think that was a challenge we overcame early in our history, and we're 40 years old this year. So it's a short journey, really, when you think some clubs are 155 years old. So it's a very short journey. Other challenges we've had, I think the obvious one is probably the drug saga we went through with our player group. That was a really difficult time for everyone. And the media scrutiny that's on clubs now, and personnel, whether it be the CEO, the coach, the players, individual players and so on. At that time, the scrutiny was all on one club. I don't think we were the only club with the same problem, but we were the club with the, I think, the most visual player in Ben Cousins at that time. And consequently, it was a really difficult challenge to overcome. And the player culture had deteriorated and we needed to fix that. So we did.
And as you alluded to, because at that stage we were a two-club town, it just, the media and the population at large, highlights individuals in that situation, perhaps more so than would be the case in Victoria, where you've got 15 clubs or whatever it is. It's they just got an awful lot of attention for the wrong reasons, didn't they?
Yeah, and brought on by the players themselves. I mean, any players who are going to transgress and go down that path, you're going to get scrutiny and public scrutiny. But I guess the question for our club was always, well, did we act quickly enough? And I think in hindsight, probably not. And I've said that on several occasions. I think, we were probably 12 months too late to try and start to rectify things, and consequently, it spiralled out of control, and that's when we lost a lot. We lost a lot of faith in our brand. We lost a lot of faith in what we were doing, so we had to rectify that, and we had to go back to last really to do that as a footy club and stabilise the place. And I guess the leadership I learned from that example was the leadership from our board, who was we had a very strong chairman in Dalton Gooding, and we stood up and said, okay, well, we're not going to change too many things in the administration, because the easiest thing to do was obviously to sack the CEO for allowing this to happen, or to make the CEO fix it. And my job was to fix it, and we did.
There's been turnover, obviously, at the board level and at the executive level within the club. Do you think the lesson that you've learned has been passed on to the current generation of leaders in the club? So if that situation occurred again today, do you think it would be handled better?
I think if you have the evidence, we didn't have a lot of evidence other than the hearsay and innuendo, but we still probably should have acted earlier. But I think if it happened again today, it would be because of the more scrutiny that's on people these days. I don't think there's anywhere to hide, and consequently, I think the board, the club, everyone would act sooner.
It's good to see Ben Cousins, appear to have got over the worst of his problems now. And, I've had the privilege of meeting him briefly on a couple of occasions, and he's such a generous character. He's great with the kids, with the fan base, and I've got nothing but admiration for the guy, and felt so sorry for him at the time. But he seems to have, shown the character that we know he has, and he's come out the other end.
Yes, he's evolved certainly as a person, and he's. I don't think he now doesn't shy away from the fact he's still troubled. He's still got his issues, but he's worked through it, and he's working really well at the moment. So we wish him all the best and just hope he can continue on the path he's on at the moment.
Let's delve a little bit more into engaging with people. It's often said that professional team sport is the moral equivalent of tribal warfare. How do you engage with a group of young, independent-minded men and encourage them to collaborate so that the team is more than the sum of the parts? How do you get that engagement and collaboration going with a group of young men?
Well, I guess that's an issue that we have across the board, I suppose, with both our men's, women's teams. It doesn't matter. We've all got to have a collective goal. And one of the things that is really important, and has been to me in my role at the club, is it's not only winning, it's also about what we can do in the community to engage with our fans and so on. And we've been able to do that over a number of years now, where our community engagement is outstanding, and it's not only metropolitan, it's regional. And I guess we need to ensure that everyone's on the same page, so that their goal is to win. There's no doubt about that, because it's an elite sport. But they also have to share the responsibility of engaging with the people who support them and pay them. And that's our fans and our members. So it's something that is hard to instill in athletes sometimes, because although they're playing in a team sport, they are individuals, and they're looking after themselves first. But once they realise that if they can actually contribute to the team in a really meaningful way, that's when they get the best result for themselves.
It must be difficult because, some really talented people, they're put on a pedestal. They're expected to be role models for the community, and I get the impression some of them just don't want to be role models for the community. They just want to play footy and enjoy it, and make a good living from it. It must be difficult for some of these, young people.
Oh, it is difficult. I think Chris Judd, who's an enormous character and great fellow, came out and said one time that he didn't want to be a role model for every, that's what your parents should be doing. Well, he got ridiculed for that over a number of years, and it still comes up like it has today. But I think Chris made the point that that was his job. His job was to be an athlete and play footy, and he would do it, and he bought into all of the community stuff and everything else that we had to do. But what he also wanted to be his own person, and it was probably what you were suggesting, Dave. It was one of those things that some players are born to be role models and others aren't.
Yeah.
And you can't convince everyone that they need to be a role model for everyone.
In terms of culture development, culture gets a lot of media attention. Certainly it does in business, and I'd imagine sport is similar. What are the indicators of a strong and healthy culture within a football environment?
Well, I think if you've got people striving for the same goal, I think it's sort of grows from within the culture. Culture's overused, I think, in a number of environments, particularly business and sporting organisations. Say you lose a few games and people say, oh, it's about their culture, it's not very good. Well, that's not always the case. The culture of an organisation might be outstanding, but it's just not performing well at the present stage. But the underlying culture is still fine. And I think if you've got people who care about each other and they want to develop a winning process both on and off field, then you get a really valuable culture. And caring, I think, is one of the big things in most organisations that make them great.
Yes.
And if you don't care, it won't happen. And you've got to care about your organisation. And it doesn't matter who you work for. If you work for a football club, a mining company, Woolworths, you've got to care about your company that you work for. And if you don't enjoy going to work and working for that company, I suggest you get another job.
Yeah, I agree. I think the basis of any good culture is a set of shared values. Every person's got a fairly wide set of values, but there needs to be some core values that are common within a group of people. And I think caring is certainly one of those. Caring, making sure you've got the other person's back because you need that collaboration to be successful as a unit, and also taking pride in what you do. And someone famously said, it's amazing what you can achieve when you don't care who gets the credit. You've got to share the glory, share the love, and recognise that you're one of a team of people that need each other.
Yeah, that couldn't be, that is exactly how it is. And I think most organisations have their vision and their values, but we've got to remember we're dealing with individuals, and all individuals will agree with everything that you put up on a board. So you've got to live it every day. And the caring part for me is a major part of why people love going to work, and I think that's all part of why we evolve and why we think we're going to do a good job when we go in.
Yeah. Your turn, Trevor. Do you have a question without notice for me?
Well, I've got one, David, that I've always wanted to know in recruitment. How do you assist a company by making sure that you've really got the right candidate if you think the pool's really shallow, how do you instill some faith in organisations to say, okay, well, we may not have the best group here, but we think this person is the right person, and I think they'll do a really good job. They may not be outstanding to start with, but they might be the right person.
Yeah, good question, Trevor. Thanks for that. Look, when I'm recruiting or assessing candidates for a position, bearing in mind that usually I'm recruiting very senior executives or directors on a board, there's always going to be a fairly limited pool of individuals worldwide sometimes who match the specification. When I'm looking at someone, I think, does this person have two things, the capability and the character? Now, the capability refers to the relevance of the experience that person's had, their track record of achievement in facing challenges and overcoming obstacles. The character, and that's frankly relatively easy to assess. If you do your due diligence and you talk with a number of people who know that person very well over a long period of time, you begin to see the jigsaw emerging in terms of capability. The character bit I'm particularly fascinated about because it's less easy, less objective to measure. I'm looking at values of the individual and how well aligned they might be to the stated values of an organisation that they'll be joining. I'm looking at things like courage, ability to earn trust and respect with other people. I'm looking at imagination. Now, these are qualities that you need to search for evidence in the person's past that they've demonstrated these leadership qualities. And if I can do enough research and do enough due diligence to feel confident that a person may be, let's say, 7 or 8 out of 10 in terms of capability, but 8 or 9 in terms of character, I feel confident about going to a client and saying, look, I can't tick every box that you need me to tick in this instance, but this is a particularly strong character of an individual. He's highly motivated, he's got energy, he's got courage and imagination. I think he would be a valuable asset to help your company develop. So it's an interesting challenge, and that's part of what I love about being in our industry. Sometimes you can't provide the very best person, but you can encourage the client to accept a 9 out of 10 person on the basis that they will be able to develop that person to realise more of their potential once they're in the organisation.
Yeah, I always wondered how you got to the end result with a shallow pool.
Yeah,
it's always difficult, but I think it's one of the most important things that you do, and what we do as organisations is to get in the right people, and if they have great character, it's a great start, even though they may not have the right skill set at that particular time. So thanks for that.
Most skills are learnable, aren't they? If you have the self-discipline and you're prepared to apply the time into developing your craft, learning your skill set, you can improve over time. And we have to bear in mind also that most really, really good quality people are not actively looking for a new job.
Yeah,
they don't need to. They're in jobs. They're being protected by their employer. So we've got to lure them out of their comfort zone, so to speak, and pitch a value proposition that really excites them, that fills a gap somewhere in their current situation. So we've got to be salesmen. We've got to influence somebody into realising that in an alternative role and organisation, they can realise more of their potential. And that's what most people want to do. They want to grow beyond where they are now and develop themselves into something better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at some rapid-fire questions. If you could invite a much-admired leader, living or deceased, to your place for dinner, who would it be, and what's the most important question you'd ask him or her?
Probably Nelson Mandela. And he probably gets mentioned a lot.
He does, actually, but I can understand why.
Yeah. The reason why I think he's greatly admired by anyone and everyone is how do you have that much resilience and that much purpose in your life to be able to resolve what he did? It's just it's just a remarkable
Yeah.
existence, really, of one person and what they've
Yeah.
achieved in their life, and had so much of their life taken away from them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
The forgiveness and the lack of recrimination, when he got out of Robben Island.
oh, it's unbelievable. And
yeah.
yeah. So that'd be the question I'd ask: how did you do it? And I don't know whether there's an answer to that. It's probably within him.
Who's the wisest person you've met?
Oh, gee, probably wisdom's a bit underrated these days too. And I think the older you get, you realise that there's a lot of people that underestimate wisdom. I think one of the wisest guys I've met is a guy called Ron Evans. He used to run the AFL competition with as chairman, but he also ran Spotless and a number of other groups out of Victoria. And I think Ron was probably one of the smartest, but also the wisest people. His decision making was almost spot on every time, and I really admired him.
Do you remember a piece of advice that he gave you that you think would be valuable to other people?
I think he said to me once, when you're looking at, and we're in this recruiting space, so I should mention, he said, when you're looking at people, sometimes it's the people you don't recruit that are going to make you successful than the ones that you do. And that was something I've never forgotten, because sometimes, whether it be our recruiting staff, whether it be our admin staff, our HR staff, jumping at someone because they've got a reputation or they played well for someone else or they're very good at something at another company doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to fit into your organisation. And I think Ron's advice was very good.
Who are the top 3 Australian rules coaches, the best of them? Who are the best 3 of all time, and what made them great?
Well, it's probably different now to how it was. I think there's people like Norm Smith, who's probably a legend of the game, who goes down as one of the all-time great coaches. In my time, though, I probably think about Sheedy and Malthouse, who we've just mentioned, who've coached 500 games of footy and 600, 700. And then you've got Alan Jeans, who was fantastic. They all have their own quirks, but I think they all have the thing that we talk about. They have courage and conviction about making decisions, and when they do that, it generally worked. And I think they've all won premierships, but they've always had successful teams. It didn't matter where they went; they always had success, and consequently, their longevity outlasts everything else. I guess it's such a hard game to stay in and keep coaching, because you get sacked more often than not.
What about the top 3 Australian rules footballers of all time?
Yeah, well, that's even harder, I guess, because there's been so many great players. You look at Polly Farmer, and he was just an outstanding player. Actually, he coached one of the years I was at East Perth, and he's a fantastic guy, Polly, but a marvellous player. Gary Ablett, our own Chris Judd, I think they're probably 3 that come to mind really quickly that I saw play. There's a lot of other players out there, but there's some budding players, Nick Dacos and these kids. I mean, they could be anything. So Bontempelli's a star, So there's a lot of great players, but those 3 were champion players and will go down as champion players.
One of my heroes back in my teenage years was a fella called Ron Wilson. You might remember him. He played for West Perth in the mid-70s.
Do remember Ron well.
Yeah.
He was a very good player, Ron. Very good player.
Yeah.
And exceptional bloke. And he was a character, because and a lot of the West Perth guys were. I think Ronnie played in the 75 Premiership.
I think he did.
Yeah.
And he I think he kicked the winning goal in that grand final.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that one, but it wouldn't matter. He'd tell everyone he did anyway.
He was a mercurial player. And, if I look at the modern day players, I look at people like Scott Pendlebury and I see shades of Ron Wilson in the way Pendlebury plays the game.
He'd be thrilled you said that.
I don't know what he's up to these days, but he was a legend as far as I was concerned in those days. What's a non-fiction book that you found very valuable?
Well, the last one I've read is one by Neale Daniher, another footballer who's Neale's dying from MND as we speak.
What a courageous man he is.
Unbelievable. Neale worked for us at the football club for a number of years as the general manager of footy. It's called The Power of Choice, an outstanding book written by Neale going through his time with MND and his family and just an unbelievable book to read. Very easy reading too, and so it was good for me. And Neale's story is one that will go down in history for someone who decided, I'm just not going to sit here and let as he calls it, the beast beat him. So,
and he's made such a difference, hasn't he, in terms of the fundraising, for trying to find a solution or a cure to MND.
Yeah, he's been an amazing person all around. He was an amazing person to work with as well because of his character and the things that he did for our football club. And when he was diagnosed, he was working with us and just soldiered on. And I think he's raised over $130, $140 million, which, the government hadn't supported in the past, the research for MND, but now they are, which is fantastic.
I'm going to get that book, The Power of Choice.
The Power of Choice.
What are you most optimistic about, Trevor?
Gee whiz, it's a tough question in this day and age, isn't it? With I'm optimistic about the growth of our kids. I think that's probably the thing that I still see the kids aspiring to be good at what they do, and I'm optimistic about that. Probably what I'm not optimistic about is, are we providing the best worldwide environment for them? And that's probably not the case at the moment. But I see a lot of kids aspiring to be the best they can be, and that's what I'm optimistic that'll continue.
I admire the AFLW competition, Trevor. It's over the years it's been a great success. I'm curious. We've seen men coaching the women's code in AFL, but do you think there'll ever be a woman who will land the head coach job of a men's AFL team?
Well, I think it's a possibility. I've recruited Daisy Pearce to the West Coast Eagles, and she has the potential to be a men's coach. There's no doubt in my mind she could do the job, given more experience and more opportunity. And there's probably others that I don't know personally, but I know Daisy personally, and I would think that that's not out of the realms of possibility.
She was a great athlete, wasn't she, for Melbourne? She played for Melbourne.
She did. She's a fabulous player, but she's going to be an outstanding coach.
What energises you?
I think being able to get up every morning and exercise and do things that I like doing, I think that's what gives me energy, and I like to think that a lot of executives these days are doing the same thing, trying to keep themselves in reasonable condition, because I think it helps your mind. I think that's the biggest thing in my life has always been enough exercise to keep you fit enough to be able to make a meaningful input at every meeting you have in long 12-hour days.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I've fairly recently taken up going back to the gym. Not for any particular need of losing weight or anything, but simply to feel good about myself first thing in the morning. You feel as though you've accomplished something. It does. You get a flush of chemicals and you just feel set for the day. Do you have any sort of productivity hacks that you do first thing in the morning to set up your day? I've
always been exercise first, and then make sure I have a breakfast if I can. Sometimes you do on the run, but I mean, that's important. But if you're an early riser, like I was when I was working all the time, I'm a little bit later these days, but not much. But certainly, I think that's the first thing that I've always thought of doing is I need to get moving and get the day started. Yeah. And the exercise bit for me was always the important thing. It energises me, but it also gets me going. Yeah. And it's the platform. Obviously, in the early days when you've got kids and that, you've got other priorities as well. You've got to get your exercise in before you take the kids to school and do all that sort of stuff. But my wife was pretty good at that.
Final question, Trevor. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
I would think not let your ego or ambition get ahead of your ability in the process.
Good advice.
Because I think there's so many kids now who have great ambition and they think they can do the job now, and there's a long way to go for them to do it.
Stay grounded and show a bit of humility.
Absolutely.
And learn as much as you can from other people.
Yeah. There's a long process for a lot of people getting into any business these days to be an executive, and a lot want to be the exec second day, and it's not that easy. So that's probably something I'd like to have been told when I was 25.
Trevor, it's been a pleasure meeting with you today and speaking with you. Thanks for your massive contribution to the West Coast Eagles in particular, and all the best to you and your family in the future.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, listeners, and thanks to Ben and Louis on the production desk today, and to Carol Wilson and Alana Bray-White for their helping getting this episode to air. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.